What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you some reasons why you might not want the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G. Now, to clarify, for what it is, I actually do think this is a really good phone, and honestly, the things I'm going to be talking about in this video are pretty minor. But at the same time, especially if you haven't bought a new phone for a while and you may or may not have slightly higher expectations, these are definitely some things to be aware of before you get the phone, just to avoid any potential disappointment. So if you're going through this video thinking these things don't really matter a whole lot, yeah, I know most of them are pretty expected for a phone like this, but at the same time, if you do think the cons of this phone seem rather trivial, then that's a pretty good sign that this actually might be a good phone for you. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about this phone, be sure to check out the description, where I will be linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But without further ado, let's get into it. So my first reason why you might not want the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G is because it doesn't have wireless charging. Now, on one hand, this phone actually has a really good battery, with a 5000 mAh battery supporting 25-watt fast charging. If you are looking for more of an affordable mid-range phone that has a really good battery that's gonna get plenty of life and longevity and has decent charging speeds too, then honestly this phone is gonna be a pretty good choice for you. But keep in mind, if you are coming from maybe an older flagship phone, for example, that does have wireless charging, and you're expecting every phone at this point in 2023 to have it, just keep in mind, so far at this point, wireless charging is really only a feature higher end devices have. So if you do want that feature, you are going to have to spend a bit more and get something like a Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, for example, as opposed to a mid-range phone like the A34 5G. My second reason why you might not want the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G is because the USB-C port does not support HDMI out. Now, to be fair, if you're maybe watching a YouTube video, for example, and you want to cast it onto your TV, you can at least do that with this phone, and for that matter, pretty much any other Android phone. But if you're maybe in a hotel room, for example, typically hotel rooms have older TVs that don't really support screencasting. In that kind of situation, unfortunately, even if you have an adapter, you can't just plug an HDMI cable into the A34 5G and actually have it work. In addition to this, if you wanted to use like Samsung DeX to hook this phone up to like a computer monitor, again, unfortunately, that's not going to work. And while I feel like for the average user, this is most likely not really going to be a big deal. Again, if your current phone is maybe an older higher end device that does support HDMI out, if you're used to that feature, then moving to this phone might be a little disappointing. Now, my third reason why you might not want the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G is the camera notch. Now, this is purely aesthetic, and I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who don't care at all about this, but as you can see here, we do have a water drop notch design for the selfie camera, and while to be fair, it's definitely not nearly as bad as a lot of other cameras that have pretty much the same design. I mean, it's not really that intrusive, it's not like it really extends the bezel too much, so in general it's at least okay, but compared to like the A54 5G, for example, that has a hole punch design instead, even though this water drop notch is at least acceptable, it doesn't look nearly as good as a hole punch. And considering aside from this, the A34 5G actually has a nice modern, more premium looking design. Having a water drop notch selfie camera really just kind of takes away from the premium feel. Now again, this is really aesthetic, and I doubt this will really be a deal breaker for most people, but maybe you're trying to decide between this phone and, say, the Samsung Galaxy A54 5G that does actually have a hole punch design instead, but is otherwise really similar in almost every other way, then in that case, this might be something to think about. My fourth reason why you might not want the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G is because it doesn't have a telephoto lens. Now, to be fair, we are getting a really nice camera setup here. So in addition to having a 13 megapixel selfie camera, which despite not having the nicest looking design, still does take some pretty good photos, on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 5 megapixel macro camera. And in addition to this phone can also record 4K videos in the rear camera and the front, so definitely a lot of camera features here. But that being said, if you want to take longer distance photos, like maybe a picture of a bird, for example, having a telephoto lens will make a huge difference. And again, unfortunately, despite having pretty much every feature you would typically find in a mid-range phone, the A34 5G does not have a telephoto lens. So if you are looking for something that has really good zoom, while the digital zoom on this phone is at least acceptable, if you do want to take pictures with a bit more zoom and still have things being good detail, you might end up being a little disappointed here. And then finally, my fifth reason why you might not want the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G is because it doesn't have a headphone jack. Now, this is especially going to go for those of you who might have an older phone, for example, because really just a few years ago, pretty much every phone besides really high-end phones had headphone jacks. But nowadays, in the last couple years, we have started to see more and more mid-range phones and even just lower-end phones that don't have them either. And while I guess it kind of makes sense when it comes to like a S23 Ultra or an iPhone or something like that, for more of a budget device like this, I feel like not having a headphone jack really just just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah, on one hand, I know most people are starting to use wireless headphones now, but I know plenty of people still use normal wired headphones, and not having a 3.5mm headphone jack is definitely inconvenient. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not the end of the world. I mean, there are adapters out there, so if you do have normal headphones, you can technically still use them with this phone, but having to buy an adapter just to use your headphones can be pretty inconvenient, and again, honestly, just seeing it taken away in a budget phone doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So if you do use normal wired headphones and you were expecting a phone like this to have a headphone jack, just keep in mind, unfortunately, again, this phone does not have one. But those were my reasons why you might not want the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G. As you can probably tell, I feel like really none of these are actually deal breakers, so in general, I do think if you're looking for more of an affordable 5G phone that has great performance, a really nice display, plenty of storage, a large battery, a nice camera, and features like NFC, you're really not going to go wrong with the Samsung Galaxy A34 5G. Now, once again, if you do want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Cleepus Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.